friends, and welcome to Collective Conversations, brought to you by the Collective AB Project and Ubuntu Mobilizing Central Alberta. I'm your host, Jolta Datris, Executive Director. Ubuntu Mobilizing Central Alberta is a registered nonprofit right here in Central Alberta serving women and youth of color. In today's conversation, we'll be joined by Sadia Anwar and Leslie Bagamba, two dynamic women who are creating change around the world right here in Alberta, in our hometown. Sadia works with women to combat sexual violence, but in her spare time, she volunteers as a board member with various agencies to build community capacity. She is a trained facilitator with a wealth of knowledge and is always looking for the next adventure. Also joining us is Leslie Bagamba. Leslie is a mother whose entire world shifted when her 18-month-old daughter suffered a near-death experience from ingesting a lithium-ion battery. This terrifying and life-altering event sparked a deep passion within her for advocating child safety and creating impactful content to spread awareness. In this episode, we are at the heart of downtown Red Deer at an amazing venue with great food and great conversations, The Venue. Come and join us with two dynamic, amazing individuals here on Collective Conversations. Let's go. So I know that saying yes sometimes amidst a busy schedule is often hard. So what made you say yes to sitting down with us today?
Sitting down with you any day, I will say yes to, without a question.
I'm going to piggyback off Sadia's answer and also add, I just love everything that Ubuntu has done so far in the community in Red Deer. So I'm happy to make time.
Awesome. It's so great to be here. So in talking about creating changes in our community, Sadia, you and I started this 4 years ago. What did that look like? And did you ever think that we would be here having amazing conversations with amazing change makers in our community?
It was a slow world of dreams that was percolating, and it was time to for it to come into reality. And Ubuntu Mobilizing Central Alberta was always a dream, and it came true.
Leslie, what does it look like for you with your advocacy? Is this where you thought you would be in your advocacy journey?
Never. No.
So what did it look like?
Prior to where I'm at now with the advocacy journey, I was very content with the 9-to-5 that I held. I'm a mom of 3 kids, so life was busy as I know it. However, with my daughter's incident, I realized that there just wasn't enough education out there for caregivers and guardians, and even within the medical community on how to treat a lithium coin ingested and just how dire it is. So it was one of those things that I made it my business to really showcase people the dangers, educate them. And it's just a living testimony to my daughter's strength of thankfully surviving the incident, and she's still here. So it's a driving force.
That's awesome. And I know that you have the documentary that you created. Tell us what happened. Like what was the incident that happened with the battery?
So the incident that happened was April of 2020. My 18-month daughter at the time ingested a lithium coin battery, and those are batteries used in your car key fob. They're used in toys. They're used in so many different things, and we didn't know she had ingested it. And the battery would rupture her esophagus, her trachea, aorta, carotid left artery. She suffered a stroke, and she had bleeding in her brain. So her prognosis of survival was very low. But thanks to the Stollery Children's Hospital, she survived and has continued to defy the odds. The journey to recovery is long.
Yes.
And I just really want to empower parents to be aware so that they don't have to walk this path that I'm on or worse.
And defying odds is what Ubuntu was created to do. I think it was 2020 was also the year that we started our work officially. But prior to that, in 2019, we had had conversations about creating an organization to create change. So what was it that made you want to defy the odds?
For me, it was to recognize that there was a gap in the community in terms of there wasn't a nonprofit or an organization that really listened and had their ear close to the community and to the ground. And we would meet in spaces and at different events, and it would be just the two of us most of the time who would be asking these the big questions. I guess that's how they were seen to everyone else, but to us it was like, did you not think of that, or why not? And to us they were simple. So it was to recognize, okay, what can a change look like in Red Deer, and what could that be? And that's when we started to have conversations, and that's actually how we met.
Yep.
And we're like, okay, something is missing.
Yep.
So let's fill that gap. And what does it look like to fill that gap?
In being a change maker, it often comes with certain labels, what you have to do, how you have to present yourself, how you have to create community, how you have to be in community. What are some of the things that people don't often know about change makers? Because in my position, sometimes people don't see the struggle.
Yes.
They see the successes of whatever it is that you're doing, but not the struggles that you're still dealing with every day. What does that look like for you?
It's the humanness, right? Because at the end of the day, we're still human. So there is a certain mask that the community gets to see, and they're like, you did this, but that's part of the story. And the backstory is being up until 2 a.m., writing proposals, working through your website, and then waking up at 9 a.m. and being at the meeting as well. So I feel like it's very important to show the whole picture of change makers and not to forget the humanness that exists within the change makers.
And to add to what Sadia said, I fully agree. And on the flips, to add on the flip side of that is when you are endeavoring to be a change maker, there's also that struggle of when you do show the whole picture, you might not be taken seriously. Right? It could be held against you, and it's super frustrating because as humans, we're not just one way. We have various aspects to ourselves. But if you show that, hey, for example, I'm struggling through depression. I really need mental health supports, but yet I'm really passionate about advocating about what happened to my daughter so it won't happen to your child. But also I'm not sleeping. You're going through all these multiple facets. People, unfortunately, human nature might not support the change-making cause because they might think you're off balance, for a better use of a word. But it's so important that the whole facet be shown. But even in that, we have to microdose how we share that,
How we show up.
so that we can achieve the main goal, which is to make that change happen.
And I would balance that question as in literally saying, what's the balance of you as a person, as a change maker, right? It's holding both, just like Leslie said, sleepless nights, and having like 3 cups of coffee in the morning
In order to get
wake
going.
up, to get going, maybe hitting the gym at 6 a.m. so you have that energy for that 9:30 meeting and to show up at that table.
And then even with the 9:30 meetings, sometimes most of us started with the 9 to 5 and having to do work before 9 and after 5 p.m. and balance family life and still connect with friends. And oftentimes, especially for women, because there's so much emotional labor that's placed on us, we have to do all of these things plus more. So you were talking about the balance. What are you incorporating now into your regular schedule that helps you keep that helps to keep you balanced?
The micro breaks, right? So being very intentional about it. So for example, at 10:30, I'm going out for a walk at 15 minutes, putting in my headphones, listening to some good beats, and then coming back. So I do believe in those micro little breaks, intentional breaks, just to keep us going and not waiting 3 months to take a holiday. Yeah. I'm just going to get away for like 3 days. The mountains are right there, so why not?
For myself, I started actually last year, which was basically the micro breaks, 10 minutes for myself, doing whatever, but just something that I wanted to do and that wasn't related or correlated to the work that I'm doing. Most of the time it has been physical activity just because I find it quite liberating. And then sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes 15, sometimes 30. Sometimes just having a conversation with a girlfriend and catching up that in between just to see how life is going, because life is still happening around you. But those have been really my go-tos.
Roxane Gay, in her book, Bad Feminist, talks about I'm not here to make friends, and the struggle that she had from high school into her professional life in making friends and being likable or being seen as the mean girl. And she said that likable characters are simply there to show that we need to follow the rules. What does that look like? How do you hold space for yourself as an amazing woman and change maker, but also not coming across as being a mean girl? Or are you a mean girl and holding space for yourself? Like, what does that look like?
I would say for myself, I've always been outspoken from the time I was a child. And luckily, I was born into a family where my uniqueness was celebrated. Even though at times it was, a woman shouldn't talk like that, or a woman shouldn't be this way. But for me, I've reached a point in my life where I openly acknowledge and state, I am not for everyone, nor do I want to be for everyone. And I can meet someone new and that's going to be the first thing they hear out of my mouth. And it's not to say that we can't be friends or acquaintances. It's just I'm letting it be known with a smile on my face that, hey, this is who I am. You may like me, you may not like me. And honestly, I don't care. But I can still be cordial with you. I can still be kind. But to what Roxane wrote in her book, I'm not here to make friends when I'm on a mission to accomplish something, but it's not lost on me that you do need allies and friends to accomplish things. You can't, I hate the quote, self-made. You weren't even made on your own. You didn't make yourself. So we're not self-made. We do need that community. So that's how I've gone about it.
You know, what comes to my mind is be you, the world will adjust.
I like that.
And that took a long time because that is in making, right? Because we grow up as women and then as women of color, and with the intersections of religion and culture and so much more to that. So we're taught to sit a certain way and be a certain way. And when you go out into the world, especially in the professional context as well, just to smile. Otherwise, you're seen as, well, she's very intimidating very unapproachable, right? And experiencing that and coming to peace with it at this time, saying, I am who I am, and the world will just have to adjust. And in saying that, being very mindful of how do I show up in this world as well. So it's work. It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
Yes, and it's tiring at times as well.
It's tiring. It's draining.
It is draining,
Even when introducing self, I struggled for a lot of years at introducing myself because my name was different. And so even introducing myself and making new friends was draining physically and mentally on myself, because then I had to explain my name and where it came from and its origin, whereas other people didn't have to. And so I struggled. Like I didn't always want to take those first steps because I didn't want to have some of those hard conversations. But now I've grown into owning my name and loving my name. So I'm going to tell you my name over and over and over again. Like you're going to know
until you get it.
Until you pronounce it right. My name is Julta, which means either God who is late or little God. And I've taken that on. Depending on the day, I can be late and still show up. And then on other days, it's me seeing the goddess in me and seeing that I'm created in a certain image and I'm allowed to have certain things. What's the meaning behind your name? How did you come into connecting with it?
You know, it reminds me of when my parents migrated to Canada and people couldn't really pronounce my name, so they kept calling me Saudi Arabia. So to this day, when I hear it just triggers me and I'm like, wait a minute. So I was called that for majority of my life school. So at some point I remember, because I was an ESL student, it was called ESL, I changed my name to Anne. I'm like, I am just going to be an Anne.
Just an Anne.
Just an Anne.
From Sadia to
and
an
I
Anne.
don't know why, but I loved that name, and I did not want to be called Saudi Arabia. You know, and now I would leave voicemail, or people would just kind of read my name, and they're like, Sadie, Claudia. So, like I said, and just like you shared, Jyotha, it is coming to that point and saying, this is what my name is.
Yeah.
And my name originates from the Arabic background, and that's where historically where it comes from. So it's just owning it at one point in your
We
life.
need to own who we are.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And I'm born in Montreal, but my parents from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So what I have found is we have what we would call a Catholic name, first
Yes.
name, which is Leslie.
Right.
And then, but my name is Chiamba, which is from the tribe that my parents are from. And then my family name is Bangamba, which is different to Western culture, where here you adopt your father's name.
Right.
Back in the Congo, I'm named after my father's sister. So you honor, so that's called Ndoyi, like I am her Ndoyi, Ndoyi, and I'm named after her. So I had to deal with not only people not being able to pronounce my name, Leslie Chiamba Bangamba, but then when my siblings and I would go to school, because we're named after different relatives,
Right.
being consistently questioned, and not that it matters, but do you have the same father? Do you have, because they don't understand the culture.
The culture
So
context.
to the point where when my mom had my two youngest siblings, they just got the same last name just to avoid that confusion. Because in my culture, the woman does not remove her last name. The children can take on the father's name, but the woman maintains her maiden name.
Wow.
I love that.
So it's only in Western culture. So there's so many things attached to our name, as you're saying, that for me it's been a journey that I went through a period of resentment. I just wanted my last name. Why wasn't it Brown?
Right.
Or why wasn't
Yeah,
it, you know, just something
Something
simple,
simple.
you know?
Yeah.
And then of course, even my parents explaining the history of why I could go into a room and meet another person who looked exactly like me, but their last name was Brown or Mackenzie. And I'm thinking, I remember, I kid you not, in grade 1, sitting down next to a girl, I can't remember her last name, for the sake of example, let's say her name was Brown. And I'm like, why isn't your name African? Like, why do you have a white person last name? Like, just so confused. If you can imagine 6-year-old me just perplexed that everyone who's black should have an African last name.
Right,
So
right.
why do you have this white man last name? And then my father made me watch Roots. And it was like, oh, but I didn't understand, right? So names for me, it's been a journey.
It is, and I think it lends to how we can define ourselves and not just allowing society to define us. Because I'm Black, I'm African, but my name isn't. And I think it's oftentimes very triggering because I want to know that, right? I want to be able to build that connection and research my name to see what tribe I'm from, but I don't have that. And I feel that it was taken from me. And now I'm curious, if I was to connect back, what would my name be?
Yeah.
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 That's a good one. That's a really powerful one. I wonder the same for my children because their father's from Haiti and his last name is very French.
Yes.
And yes, they carry their father's name, but a part of me does wonder, like, what's the background?
the
to that?
origin?
And what would have been
What would
your
have been-
original
yeah.
name?
And so that to me comes into intersectionality. So we're all women, but our stories are different. Our stories of origins are different. We have different languages, different cultures, but yet we still share so many of the same struggles, which is where collective conversations comes in, where we can sit and gather together and share our stories and build that community. I still feel as if we're still lacking in that a bit, that we've made so many strides and we've progressed so much, but there's still so much more to accomplish. How do you feel about that?
I feel like having the consistent conversations, never shy away from asking what is your connection and what is your story behind your name, right? And it is recognizing that in these spaces, these conversations may not be happening and they're surface level conversations, but the conversation that we're having right now is just so wholesome, right? Yep. And we're not really sharing the parts of our stories, but we're getting to know the whole story. And I feel like that's what happens out into the world. It's, you know, someone knows just a little bit of a part and someone knows the other, and that's just how you're kind of boxed in the world. Yep. So for me, I personally shy away from that conversations, I guess you can say. It's like, how am I showing up to this conversation? Is it going to be surface level? And I know I leave it in that room and I walk away. But where can I have the wholesome conversations and to be able to connect this way? So I think just being very consistent in showing up and bringing your own chairs. And we love this quote.
Absolutely. Bring your own chairs. Bring your own folding chairs to the table. Thank you for that. Like, I think that was really insightful. How are you showing up today, Leslie?
For me, I think it's important that we all hold space for each other. And that's something I find, like just sitting here, what you mentioned, we're all women, but we all have different backgrounds, different histories, different cultures. You know, the term BIPOC, some people hate that term. I'm neutral when it comes to it. I think what's lacking when we say the term BIPOC is, okay, I'm a Black woman, but when I'm speaking with an Indigenous woman, what's her story? When I'm speaking with a woman who's Indian or South Asian, Asian or South Asian, what's her story? Pacific, you know, just when I'm speaking with them, what's their story? Holding space that we might not have the same lived experiences, but we should be each other's allies, and hold space for each other, because there will be many points of connection, and I think that's what I seek. But like Sadia, if it's going to be surface, I just walk away.
And you know, there is that comfort level when you walk into a space, and I don't know these women, but I see similarities with them. And they could look like me, or both of you, or Indigenous, like Leslie said, but there is that comfort in knowing, like, we make that eye connection, and I'd be like, I'll be okay.
This is your space.
This is my space. Yes. You know, I can be brave enough. And possibly maybe safe enough within these spaces as well. But so I have always noticed that. And we'll just make that eye connection or just say hi to each other, but we don't know each other.
Right.
We've never seen each other before. And that connection.
Yeah, and I think with connections, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of deep work. And I had to challenge myself. I've had to challenge myself to connect with people, because I was accustomed to not to being disappointed, whether it's in professional life, in personal life, where, you know, you put your all into this relationship, this friendship, and then it doesn't evolve to what you want it to be. And I think this is why when we created the collective AB, it was to bring us together, to center on why we're here, why we're all here, and what are we bringing to the table. And I still struggle with that. Like, I still...
And you know what this reminds me, Leslie may not know, because when me and Jiltha met, and I'm a hugger. When I like you, I like you. Otherwise, you'll know. So I'd be like, okay, let's hug. And she would hug me
from the side.
From the side.
The church hug.
The church hug.
That's what it's called, or for 2 seconds, and I'm like, no, we're not doing it that way.
I am not a hugger.
She's not a hugger. But now we hug each other,
do.
even if we see each other 3 times a day in different, we're hugging. And that was something that was
I
not
had
as
to-
easy
no,
to you, and we had
yes.
to work on that.
And she would always say, "No, I want a good hug," and I'm like, "You're getting the good hug."
Like
no.
heart-to-heart connection. A good hug.
The 6 seconds.
Yes. No, I could. It was hard work, but I think because I felt safe with who she was and the work that we were doing, that I allowed myself, and she also gave me the time too to get to that space where I was comfortable in getting a hug, to the point that now I ask for hugs, right? But before, do not touch me. Like, I'm not here for it. In her book, Pouring Down Rain, Cheryl Fogo, who is an amazing pillar in the Black community in Alberta, she says that sometimes we just need to let the silence stand. How can we and how should we enjoy the quietness and the calm amidst the chaos of a changing world? Like, how do we allow ourselves to stand in the silence?
I feel like we live in this world, especially in these times now, where we're not used to the silence.
No.
It's like quick answers, quick questions, or if you go to a venue or a session, it's like, okay, we got 10 minutes for Q&A,
Yep.
and you get in as much as you
Yep.
can. So being very mindful and knowing that there's power to this silence, right? And then just sit with it, and making time for that as well, in that slowness. And I feel like the environment around us just doesn't allow us to do that. So for me, I feel like just there's so much. It's something that you work towards, right? To sit in silence with yourself, but when you show up to the spaces as well, because not every question requires an answer or a response. And being okay with saying, you know what, I'm going to sit in my silence,
And I'm gonna
that's
think about
enough.
it.
Yeah, and I'm going to think about it.
Do you struggle with silence or quietness?
No, I don't. Ironically,
Really?
as extroverted as I am, I don't struggle with silence. I think what can make it uncomfortable is other people struggling with the silence. So
Silence.
now you're questioning
Right,
yourself, so you
right.
need to reassure yourself, and whatever they may be going through, that's a them problem. But for myself, sitting in the silence, even though it might seem counterintuitive, is finding pockets of joy.
Yeah.
So I love to work. The best time for me to work as a busy mom is when the house is silent, the kids are sleeping. That's actually a gift I give myself. As much as like, oh, I could work while they're awake and then we all go to bed at the same time. I love when the house is silent and I can just hear my thoughts, and I have some soft jazz in the background, and I just feel like, yes. And it's my way of recharging, but also my way of recharging while we live in a world that's, like Sadia was saying, do this, do that. We're only going to carve out this
amount of
finding
time.
the joy, and honestly sharing that joy so that others, if they want to take it, joy is free. Whether joy is free.
We need that on a t-shirt.
No,
Joy
it's
is
true.
free.
Joy is true. Joy is free. It's your God-given right. It's free. And I'm not, especially if you're not going to attach it to something tangible. Joy is an intangible. Yeah. It comes from within. It really does. So I find for myself really prioritizing pockets of joy, because the world is going to world.
The world is going to world.
People are going to people.
And
Exactly. People are going to people. The world is going to world.
Yes.
But you need to give yourself permission to have pockets of joy and be okay with other people not understanding or even having to explain yourself. And that's that silence, right? Like,
Right.
I don't have to explain what brings me joy. I don't have to explain that to you.
With Collective AB, I think one of the things that we did too in the first round of this project was to say we wanted to celebrate the joy. Because with the stories of folks that we brought in, we didn't want to focus on the trauma and the heartache and the harm that has been caused to different communities, but we asked people what sparked their joy. So circling back 4 years later, and you're saying to find the pockets of joy, this is why the project was created, for us to celebrate ourselves, for us to celebrate each other, for us to celebrate our community. as hard as it is sometimes to find the pocket of joy. So how do you find your pockets of joy? And where are your pockets of joy, by the way? Do you hide them or do you carry them with you?
Silence is one of them. It's a pocket of joy, just sitting there, being out into the nature, being among amazing women, just like this right now, and just sitting there in silence, but yet everyone is talking. And personally for me, I just like quietness. It's that peace it brings me, right? So being not as talkative and not knowing that I need to come up with an answer with that, that really is
A pocket of joy.
pocket of joy for me, yeah.
Me, it's dancing.
Does it?
Me, it's dancing. I just, as they say in French, je me défoule. Like, it's just dancing, and then dancing with like my kids,
Yeah.
especially dancing with my daughter. You know, it's one of those things every time we're doing something like that, I have to pause. I'm like, wow, I get to do this with you and with all my children, but especially my daughter, just because of what we've been through together. And just, it's really dancing for me. Like, I know it seems pretty blah, but, and it's not even about, oh, you got to move a certain way. Just moving and just dance brings me joy.
Yeah, that gives me pause to think about what brings me pockets of joy, because I think it's been so hard for me to find it that when I do find it, I don't always realize that it is. And I think in our work, sometimes we forget how much we've done.
Yeah. I
And
got
how-
the side eye earlier today.
Bombastic side eye.
I think sometimes we've had to take moments and remember, oh, we did this. When we're looking back at pictures and videos, we oftentimes don't remember all the work that we've done because it was so busy. But I think we still, our car ride home from events would be the moments that we would just sort of like sit back and take in that moment. But it would just be for a few minutes.
It would be, and it reminds me, we were in Innisfail once or twice maybe,
Yes.
anyways, and
Twice.
we had facilitated for,
Yeah.
like, had worked all day and then drove to Innisfail and then facilitated with folks out at Innisfail.
Yeah.
And our drive back, I'm like, Jotha, I can't speak English.
Yeah,
I'm
it
tired
went-
of speaking English. And I was trying to say something and it just wouldn't come out.
It just would change, like, I think, and then it
Yeah.
became the norm because both of our language would change
Mm-hmm.
after a while, and I think because the work was draining a bit. And so then when we were able to sit back and just be ourselves on the drive home, she couldn't remember some words in her language and I couldn't
Nope.
remember some words in my language. And so we just had to decipher what we were saying, but
Yeah, like I would say something and she's like, why do you sound? And I'm like, because I can't speak English right now. But I'm like, you know what I mean. She's like, yeah, I know what you mean.
and it was like, what is that? And we listen to music all the
Yep.
time in
always
the vehicle, whether we're driving to an event or from an event, and so that helped us to really.
Yeah, like Jilta grabs my phone and she's like, okay, where is that playlist? This is what we're playing.
I'm just here to say, like, the work you guys have done thus far, like, it's thankless. Like, it's thankless work. You don't, you're helping people navigate systems that were not created to serve them in the first
Yeah.
place, right? So it's already emotionally draining. And then I cannot even imagine the stories that you hear daily
Yep.
in the line of work that you're in.
Yeah.
And it may not have a role such as a EMS provider or a 911 dispatcher who's basically being contacted and people are having probably the worst day of their lives. But I still hold it in the same regard because if you had not created Ubuntu, I don't know where those folks could go to obtain that support, where people could hold space for and see them as human, first of all, because, there is a bit of a disconnect. The joke when people don't speak English, so they start yelling at you like this, because I am going to talk to you so you can understand what I'm
Yes.
saying. And it's like you're completely disconnecting from, like, they're human. They don't speak the language. Yelling at them is not going to change that, they can understand you or not. So I just want to say the work you do is thankless,
Yeah.
but you guys have been doing amazing work, especially living in Alberta where, you know, the diversity numbers have grown. And then in Red Deer, right, where if there wasn't Ubuntu, well, I think people would be stuck having to just rely on their families, and there wouldn't be that community
Yeah.
that to build upon. It'd be pretty fragmented.
And I think when we had no idea in 2019 when we were having some of these conversations of where it would lead, but the name Ubuntu comes from the African philosophy, which means I am human because you're human. And so in everything that we did, we had to remember this is why we were here.
And we're so good because I was thinking the same thing, what you just said, right? Because we had gotten asked, or we do get asked, what keeps you going?
Yes.
And this is what we say, it's
Yeah.
the philosophy.
Yeah, it's the name. And,
Yeah.
and so every time we say the name of the organization, we're breathing life into it, and we're breathing life into ourselves to be able to continue to do some of the work. Like, it's not the sexy work. Like, most
No.
of the work that people see
Yeah.
are the good
Yeah.
work, the amazing things, the sexy things, but then it's the unsexy things that happens.
Yeah, and also we read each other's minds so well. So she will be across the room and she'll just look at me and I know what she's thinking,
Yeah.
and vice versa. And then we'll come back and we're like, yeah, I know.
And making space, and this is
Yeah.
collective conversations is about making space for each other, because there are times where I don't have it in me to go one step more, and she's there to pick up, and she's like, no, we're going to do this, we'll be able to do this. And I know that you in your work has had to find that motivating factor. And you talk about dancing with your daughter to keep going, that despite the challenges, there's something that's there. How do we share that with more women in our region?
Yeah.
Well, starting with this.
Starting with that,
Right, starting with this, to open up that conversation. And I think even just building off what this is, right? Like right now it's us in front of camera. The next, it could be us still in front of a camera, but with a bigger group of women extending
Absolutely.
it out, to bringing in the community. Because yes, Ubuntu, I know the demographics that you primarily serve, but bringing in even those who may not need Ubuntu to serve them, but they can be of support, and building those I don't know, the string of community, even though, oh, we don't work, but we're aware of the work they do, and this is what our organization does, and this is how we can support that initiative within the organization that is Ubuntu.
I feel like Collective AB is a platform, right? And we are the background folks, myself and you, and having that space and platform and saying, let's just talk. Let's just come and have those wholesome, honest conversations that are also part of our stories as well. But really being mindful in creating that space as well, right? So where we would feel comfortable, and with Collective AB, it's like, yeah, I can talk about that. And that's part of my life, and be like, okay, you got this.
So we're talking about doing the work collectively. We know we've always said, if you're not giving a seat at the table, bring your own folding chair. But we've also talked about making space for other people. So tell me, if you could have one more person sitting beside you, who would it be and why?
Ooh, if I could have Viola Davis.
Okay.
I just feel that what's missing in this world sometimes is people seeing each other,
Yep.
right? Like Sadia had mentioned it earlier in the beginning of this conversation, where people only see the outcome, but not the background to it. And I just feel that, yes, it's her own story, her own lived experience. But when I see the impact by her that she's had by telling her story in her book, and just how some way, somehow, different people from different walks of life can relate.
Yeah.
And even just seeing the work that she does outside of being an actress.
Yes.
And for myself, I might add, as a dark-skinned Black woman, like all those parts, and that could be a whole other conversation with
Right.
colorism that we have in the
Right.
world. That's who I would want.
Viola.
Viola Davis, yeah.
I feel like having Viola at this table, we got it covered. So for me, it would be these amazing upcoming young women, right? Who you see at the front line, may it be at your workplace or just community gathering or volunteering spaces, and saying, you're okay. And for us women to stand beside them and saying, we'll help you figure it out.
Yeah.
We know life is hard, and how do I know? Because I've lived it. So I don't want you necessarily to go through all those hardships. Let me stand beside you. That's who it would be.
And just to add to Sadia, she's lived it and she's still living it and she's doing it, thriving.
She
Okay,
is.
so-
She's thriving. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. It's lovely to have you both and to hear your stories and to share in the struggles that we're all a part of, but that we're in Red Deer, we're in Central Alberta, and we're continuing to change our communities to create braver spaces and to create the space that we can all be in our whole authentic selves. So thanks again for joining us here on Collective Conversations.
Thank you for having us.